Man United have just had their worst ever Premier League finish, finishing in 8th place, eclipsing the absolutely abysmal 2013-14 season under David Moyes. A season absolutely riddled with the most injuries in the Premier League. There was chaos off the pitch as well, and complete instability with new owners coming in. A campaign difficult for pretty much any manager to thrive in. 14 league defeats is the most we have lost since the 89-90 season, where we lost 16 games. It's also the first time we've had negative goal difference and the lowest league position since that very same 1989-90 season. The manager at that time was Sir Alex Ferguson. But despite all of this, Manchester United have still won the FA Cup, beating Liverpool and Manchester City along the way. And it's worth remembering as well, when we look at the entire body of work under Erik ten Hag, last season it was a 3rd place finish and another trophy in the Carabao Cup. At least, if nothing else, Erik ten Hag is proving that despite this being the worst season of his managerial career, he is still capable of winning trophies, and that is a very good trait to have. Now is the time to back Erik ten Hag, give him another year with a proper structure around him, and see how good of a manager he can actually be. If he's winning FA Cups, finishing 3rd, winning the Carabao, these are the first trophies United had won in 6 years, let's not forget. He can do that with the shambles of a club around him, with an aging training ground, with a stadium that's fallen in, and everyone knows Manchester United are behind the times. If he can do that under those circumstances, just think what he could do with a functioning, best-in-class club around him. United have had an absolutely terrible season this year. I don't think anyone would deny that. Ten Hag himself called this season a mess, and it has been a mess. 58 goals conceded, which is 15 more than last season. Only 9 clean sheets as well. United have conceded the most shots of any team in the league, even more than Sheffield United, who had conceded the most goals in the history of the Premier League. We conceded more shots than that. That's how bad it has been this season. But you can't just look at the outcomes and assume that is all Ten Hag's fault. We have to look at what led to those outcomes. What are the things that have been in the way of Manchester United this season? The first one that has to be mentioned, is the number of injuries that Manchester United have had. BBC released an article at the end of the season detailing that United had had more injuries than any other club in the Premier League, more than double the number of injuries that Arsenal had had in the same time frame. That makes a big difference. I think we've had 33 different defensive back lines, more than 14 centre-back partnerships as well. When you want stability, when you want to be able to play out from the back, when you want to be able to bring in the tactics that Ten Hag is so keen on, you can't do that with a rotating cast of defenders. And not just rotating. Luke Shaw, one of the most important players in the squad, arguably the best left back in the world when he's fit, has been injured for almost the entire season. Lisandro Martinez played the first few games of the season, clearly unfit, and has been injured for almost the rest of the season as well. We saw the difference he made in that FA Cup final. What difference would there have been if we'd have had just those two back for the rest of the season, let alone the Harry Maguire, who's been unusually injured by his standards, Rafael Varane, Willy Camboala, Johnny Evans, Victor Lindelof, who've all been out at certain points in the season, and for a while were all out at the same time, and we had Casemiro playing at centre-back. These things aren't normal. These things aren't just, you have to get used to it. Injuries happen, but this doesn't happen. You don't always have the club with the most injuries in the entire Premier League. That is a very, very big hurdle for a manager to jump over. And when you look at the other clubs in the Premier League, it's a similar story. You don't just come in and take over a team finishing 6th and 7th and win the Premier League with them in 2 seasons. It took Jurgen Klopp 5 years to win the league with Liverpool. Arteta is still challenging, still trying to get those trophies. He's won less trophies at Arsenal than Ten Hag has at United. He finished 8th twice before he started making advancements for a Premier League title. Erik ten Hag can't just be expected to be challenging for the league in his 2nd season with a squad that isn't up to it and with a structure around him that was never going to work. And this is true for Manchester United historically as well, because you look at Sir Alex Ferguson, the greatest football manager of all time. He had a bizarrely similar first few seasons as Manchester United manager to Erik ten Hag. He took over in the 86-87 season. Manchester United were struggling, facing relegation, and he took them through the rest of that season to a safe 11th place. But it wasn't just on the pitch that Sir Alex made his mark. He had massive hurdles to get over in terms of discipline at the club and what was perceived as a drinking culture. Now, that drinking culture may have gone, but you look at the culture at Manchester United when Erik ten Hag arrived. Players more keen on making money than winning football matches. A team that hadn't won a trophy for 5 years when he arrived. That is not a Manchester United that is in a good place. Erik ten Hag came in and, much like Sir Alex Ferguson, revamped the academy system, an academy system that we are now seeing just 2 years later absolutely sweep the under-18s league. It is one of the best young teams in the UK. Sir Alex Ferguson talked about being depressed at the levels of fitness of the squad he inherited as Manchester United manager. Do you remember last season when Erik ten Hag had to make his players run 13 kilometres in training because that's how much they were outworked by Brentford? In his first full season at Manchester United, Sir Alex Ferguson made some big signings. Steve Bruce, Viv Anderson and Brian McClare came in to make a big impact as Manchester United finished second in the Premier League. Ten Hag's first full season, United signed Casemiro, Martinez, Eriksen, Antony and finished third in the Premier League, with those players, maybe aside from Antony last season, all being crucial in improving the culture and the performances at Manchester United. But it wasn't just on the pitch. Do you remember last season when Cristiano Ronaldo spoke to Piers Morgan and basically slagged off the entire club publicly while he was still employed by them? That happened. Also, Jadon Sancho had to go away for a few months because his mind wasn't right to play for Manchester United. There's also the ongoing drama with Mason Greenwood that was settled and then not settled and then he's gone out again. Like, the amount of things that Erik ten Hag has had to deal with, even just in his first season at Manchester United, is ridiculous for a new manager. Especially when you're coming into one of the biggest clubs in the world that theoretically should be very well run. We know it's not, but that doesn't mean that Erik ten Hag should have to fix all of these problems by himself. United had spent some big money in the transfer window that summer, signing the likes of Neil Webb, Mike Phelan and Paul Ince, as well as Gary Pallister and Danny Wallace. However, Manchester United took a massive step backwards. They finished 13th in the First Division and lost 5-1 to Manchester City. There is the infamous bedsheet, 3 years of excuses, and it's still crap. Terror Fergie was displayed at Old Trafford, and many journalists and supporters called for Sir Alex Ferguson to be sacked. Sir Alex Ferguson described this as the darkest period that he had ever had in football, and we even ended the first half of the season just outside of the relegation zone. And what turned it around? The infamous game against Nottingham Forest. Mark Robins scoring the winner against, at the time, a very, very in-form and highly fancied Nottingham Forest. United went on to win the FA Cup 1-0 in a replay against Crystal Palace, and so the legend goes, that game saved Sir Alex Ferguson his job. The point of this isn't to say if we give Ten Hag another year, he'll turn into Sir Alex Ferguson. That isn't going to happen. No one expects that. No one would rightly believe that. And, you know, the fact that all they seem to share at the moment is they've had a bad season at Manchester United is hardly grounds for you've got to keep him because we kept Sir Alex. But one thing is worth noting. Take away Ten Hag out of this. Even managers as good as Sir Alex Ferguson, we know how good he is. He was good then, he was good in the 90s, he was good in the 2000s, he was the best manager in the world for 25 years in a row. Even managers as good as that are capable of seasons like this. That's the takeaway from this. I'm not saying that Erik ten Hag is Sir Alex or he will go on to be anything like as successful as him. In fact, I'll sit here now and guarantee he won't. But you can't say that just because someone's had a bad year, that makes them a bad manager. And if you do, you're saying that Sir Alex Ferguson should never been given a chance after that 13th place finish. That's all I'm trying to say. And the critics will say that Erik ten Hag has shown tactical inflexibility this season. You've got all these injuries, maybe try something different. Maybe try a plan B. Maybe don't just go hell for leather, attack, despite the fact that you're conceding more shots than Sheffield United. And actually, I can't disagree with that. There's definitely things to criticise Erik ten Hag for. I'm not sitting here saying he's perfect. Why don't you believe me? Like, it's been terrible this season. And Ten Hag has to take some of the blame for how terrible we've been, without question. Should we have played a little bit more counter-attacking football at times? Should we have been a little bit more compact to account for the fact that instead of Luke Shaw, Lisandro Martinez, Rafael Varane and Dalot, you've got a back four of Wan-Bissaka, Casemiro, Johnny Evans and Amrabat? Maybe we should have done that. But that doesn't mean that you lose your job because you make a few mistakes under incredibly rare circumstances. I think we have to give Erik ten Hag another season for many reasons. One of them is winning the FA Cup. That cannot be understated. That is the third biggest trophy a football manager can win. It is a big deal winning the FA Cup. And not just winning it, we also on the way beat Liverpool, who were going for a quadruple at that point. We then beat Manchester City in the final. And not just did we beat what is the best team in the world according to Ten Hag and pretty much everyone else you might ask, not just did we beat them, we deserved to beat them. Ten Hag's tactics outthought and therefore allowed his team to outplay Pep Guardiola's Man City. That isn't easy to do. That doesn't happen very often. Pep had won 21 of the 23 finals he had been in until that day at Wembley. That is massive. And if as Man United fans, we get to the end of next season and say, the improvements haven't been there, we aren't seeing any more tactical improvements, the players he's brought in again have underwhelmed, then we can address that at the end of next season. But I think we gave Erik ten Hag a 3-year contract for a reason, because we think it's probably going to take 3 years to turn this mess around. And that is if everything goes to plan. We should at least give him those 3 years. And along the way, he's given us 2 trophy wins. That FA Cup final win against Manchester City is one of the best moments I've had as a Manchester United fan in the last decade. He is delivering those moments, and he did it last season as well. We can't take that for granted. We hadn't won a trophy in 6 years until that Carabao Cup win. These things are hugely important. And to people who say that he's lost the dressing room, I can't tell you for sure. I'm not in that dressing room, and neither are you. But what we do see after that game is the players coming together, the manager and the connection to the players. Lisandro Martinez, again, who we've missed so much this season, being such a connection between the manager that brought him from Ajax and the rest of the players around him who clearly respect Martinez as a leader and as a player in that dressing room. It makes such a big difference when you have those connections between team and manager, and they can look at Martinez and they can see what's happening at Manchester United, and hopefully that can keep that dressing room firing on all cylinders. I'm not saying that everyone loves Ten Hag. I'm sure they don't. Jadon Sancho, we know for a certain, doesn't. But I do think that this is a team that is still playing for their manager. Look at those tactics. Look at that performance on Saturday. That isn't a team that's given up. It just isn't. And finally, let's have a look at the alternatives. If we were to sack Ten Hag, if he was to go, who could United bring in? Because it's all well and good saying Ten Hag out, I've seen enough, he's got to go. Okay, let's get rid of him. You have to replace him. You don't just get to start next season with no manager or bring Sir Alex back. You have to get someone who is available, or at least remotely available. First up then, Gareth Southgate. Do I even need to say anything here? He's failed in his club job at Middlesbrough. He's never won anything with England, despite doing a decent job. International managers typically do not make great club managers, and especially one whose only mark on his CV is a negative one of getting Middlesbrough relegated. Next up is Thomas Tuchel. I mean, he's finished third place with Bayern Munich, which I thought was impossible until this season. He falls out with players, he falls out with the ownership, he never stays at clubs more than 2 years. Yes, he's probably on this list the most guaranteed to win trophies, but he doesn't stick around. United need a rebuild. We don't need a manager that's just going to tip us over the edge to win a Premier League. We aren't there yet. United need someone who can come in, make relationships and be part of the next chapter at Manchester United. Thomas Tuchel has never given me any evidence that he can do that, and I don't want to be sat here in another 2 years going, United have got a new manager because Tuchel fell out with everyone. I just don't want to have to do that. Pochettino's another option who did pretty well at Tottenham, yeah, but he didn't win a trophy with them. He couldn't get them over the line against Leicester in the Premier League. Then he goes to PSG, does fine, comes to Chelsea, does all right and gets sacked. He's not someone you go, oh, brilliant, Pochettino's around, we've got to get him. He goes places, does pretty well and gets sacked. Do we want that? Do we want, okay, oh, that's not bad and gets... No, we need better than that. We need the next manager to be able to win things. And Pochettino is the last person that comes to mind when you think winning trophies. De Zerbi's done pretty well with Brighton, but this season hasn't been good at all. And you look at his CV, he stays places 2 years and then leaves. I want someone that's going to be here, or at least could be here, for a handful of years. Be at Manchester United for a while, build something, win things. I just don't see De Zerbi as being that guy. Also, Thomas Frank is on the list. And again, he's a decent manager, but finishing 16th with Brentford is hardly the CV that gets you the Manchester United job, is it? Really? Think about it. Thomas Frank managing Man United. I'm not saying he's the worst man, but he's the Brentford manager. He finished 16th. What gives him the credentials to manage Manchester United? I just don't see it. And Kieran McKenna was the final one who at least seemed a little bit exciting. Back-to-back promotions with Ipswich. He's staying at Ipswich. We can't get Kieran McKenna now anyway, and he's never managed in the Premier League. So again, it's hardly a safe bet. I just think you look at the options available and you take that into account. There's no reason to stray from Erik ten Hag. And I think he's got his weaknesses. We spoke about it before. Tactical inflexibility. At times he lacks charisma. Maybe he's not the best man manager in the world, but he's good at winning trophies. He's done it everywhere he's been. And like he said himself, if we get rid of him, he'll just go somewhere else and win trophies. And as we know as United fans, it's very easy to bring other managers in and they don't all win things. It can be years without trophies. And if Ten Hag is bringing that, and we know from his past at Ajax, we know from last season that he is tactically aware that he can build something with the right team, with a better injury record. I think we can see much, much better things from Erik ten Hag. And when you look at the options to replace him, none of them are better than him. That's the crucial thing here. None of those guys are better than Erik ten Hag, and certainly not better suited to what Manchester United needs at the moment. And just like Sir Alex needed patience all those years ago, Ten Hag needs a little bit of patience now as well. There's 1 year left on his contract. Give him that year. He has earned that year. We can make our minds up after that once we've got a new structure in place. Dan Ashworth is still on gardening leave when he's not sending dodgy emails. Omar Barada hasn't even started in the job yet either. Wait till this structure is in place. Wait till it is fully firing before we judge Erik ten Hag. He's been working under a changing, faltering system at Manchester United, and he deserves at least one season under a little bit more stability. We've stuck with managers in the past, and that's worked out pretty well. Let's give Erik ten Hag 1 more year.